everyone, and welcome to another round of Chitter Chatter. Today we're going to chit chat with author Farhad on his new book, Poorly Beloved. Well, like you can see, in this Chitter Chatter, we have interesting minds behind stories that move us, entertain us, and sometimes even challenge the way we see the world. So today, I'm in conversation with the author Farhad, whose novel Poorly Beloved is a warm, humorous, and a heartfelt story filled with chaos, but which wedding is without a chaos? So the story follows Ved Mehra, a Mumbai industrialist who believes he has finally found the love of his life in chaos and the love of his life in Carlos Silva. But as wedding is about to begin, secrets emerge, past relationships resurface, and family dynamics turns everything into a beautiful, messy ride. So let's welcome Farad on this chitter chatter.
Yeah,
Welcome to Chitter Chatter.
thanks. It's good to be back.
Yes, I have been waiting for a very long time to read a nice queer novel because there is nothing. The last novel that I read and I really enjoyed was your novel. And we are
Yeah.
back here again talking about your current novel. So tell us all about this novel before we start further.
Okay, so Queerly Beloved, basically about two guys, Wade Mera and Carlos Silva, living together in Bandra for 3 years. And Wade, who's a little older, decides that, he's going to seal the deal now and ask Carlos to marry him. Of course, it's still not legal in India, but he still says, you know what, I'm going to take my chances. So after much thought and trepidation, all of that, pops the question. And Carlos, of course, agrees because they're ready to get married, right? They really love each other. They're ready for it. And just when they start talking to the family and start preparations, one hurdle after another comes their way, sort of throwing this whole marriage up in jeopardy. Like, you don't know whether it'll actually happen because everybody has issues going on of their own, you know? So it's a fun, playful, very romantic rom com, but it also touches upon important issues like same sex marriage still being illegal in India, which is a big thing, right? It's such a big topic, really. And also, Shweta, the thing is, even if you do get married, it's almost impossible to start a family in India because surrogacy is illegal as well as adoption is illegal. So, how do you have kids if you want to have kids, as a gay couple? So, it also touches upon that aspect. But it is a fun, playful, a really happy rom com about this big wedding being planned and all the issues and a lot of I would say it's a really, really nice romance, if you ask me. Like, there's a lot of romance between the two of them, which is nice.
So let's start at the very beginning. Every
Hmm.
book begins somewhere. Sometimes with an idea, sometimes with a character, sometimes with a feeling. Where did this book begin for you?
Yeah. So, the strange thing is, I don't plan my next book at all. After The Other Man, I had no clue what I would write next. Till several months later, maybe a year later, I actually interviewed two gay couples, one lesbian couple and one gay couple, during the time when a lot of people were petitioning the High Court about, same-sex marriage. It was that time when a lot of petitions were coming in and they were
Yeah.
trying to push it through. So around that time, as an news article, I interviewed two couples asking them, how important is this piece of paper for you? Because they'd been living together for a long time and they were very happy. So I was like, how, and both of them, Shweta, very nicely, both of them said it does not matter. If it comes through, great. If it does not come through, we are not going to stop our celebration. We're going to go ahead and get married. And both of them were very clear about that. That great if it comes in, but otherwise we are not stopping. We're going to go and celebrate our love. And something just clicked in my mind with that. I just felt like, what, something like this really needs to be spoken about. This aspect needs to be talked about. And frankly, honestly, we don't have another book on a gay wedding. We
Right.
don't, which is very strange considering it's such a big topic. Like, it's such an important topic, it's such a pertinent topic, but we still don't have anything in literature on it. So I said, okay, nobody else is writing it, I'm writing it. I just went for it, you know.
So, what came first in your mind? Like, okay, you decided, okay, I am the one who's going to write about this great gay wedding filled with all the masala and drama and everything. But what came first to you, Faith or the wedding? That, this is what I'm going to write.
I mean, see, The Other Man already had Wade and Carlos in it, right? This is not a sequel to that book. It is a standalone book, but the characters were already there in my head. I just felt I wanted to complete their journey. Like I felt that book was about them dating, getting together, all the issues with that aspect. Him being almost married off, all of that stuff. But I felt like I felt they hadn't had a happy ending as yet. They needed their journey to be completed. So it was everything together. That article just clicked in my head when both couples told me that, Farhad, we are not waiting for this piece of paper. We're going to go ahead with it. And that's a reality. Like that's an actual situation that's happening. So I was like, okay, that's going to be great. If that's happening in reality, why doesn't it happen in literature? And so it was both of them. It was basically Wade and Carlos, but of course I had to make it different. There were different issues involved. There's a different storyline involved. Even the mother has now a younger love of her own, which is something, Shweta, I thought was very important, because people have this issue, especially with women, where they feel that if you're an older woman, you can't fall in love again, and you can't fall in love with a younger guy. You know what I mean? Like they have this very strange thing that it's not. And I was like, I want to shatter that. You know what I mean? Because what are you supposed to do when you turn 60? Are you just supposed to roll over and die? I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, why can't you love somebody again?
You're supposed to complain. I'm in pain. I have nobody. This is what they expect out of us.
Yeah, it's absurd. It's really. So there were different issues I wanted to touch upon besides the queer issues. That was an important thing for me to talk about. Also, older women and how lonely it can be for them if they've been divorced or out of a relationship, and finding somebody who's there. So what if he's younger? So what if he's hot? I mean, good for her. You know what I mean? Like, lucky her. So why complain? You know?
But what made you want to tell this story through humor and warmth? What I really like about your books are that it comes with a nice narrative, which is not heavy. Because usually, when you want to do so much preaching or come up with something which has been a taboo, now it's been accepted. There's so much heavy narrative that you're like, acha, okay, maybe I'll read some other time. But your book is filled with a lot of humor, with a lot of warmth. So, what made you do this? Is it because you're like this as a person?
No, I mean that's honestly just my style. But also, I feel we don't have gay rom coms here. Like honestly, my last book and this book are the only two gay rom coms largely. Maybe one or two which are somewhere around there. You know what I mean? But as a genre, we don't have queer rom coms. We don't have queer romances, which are very big internationally. Like here we're still around, say, 10 queer books coming out a year. But just to give you an idea and a comparison, just in December, internationally, there were 200 LGBT books that came out. One
Wow.
month. Yeah. So see the difference, right? I mean, obviously there's a demand for it. Obviously people want to read these stories. So for me, I was like, this is how I write. I'm not gonna do a book about trauma and tragedy, because I feel there are enough of novels on that. Enough queer novels dealing with that. That's not my space. I'm like, good for them if they want to go ahead with it. But I want to do something that's playful, that's inspiring. Also don't forget, Shweta, there are lots of closeted gay men, you know, and I want to give them hope when they read this. I want them to feel good. I mean, I really feel these serious queer novels that are there don't celebrate queer lives. They're just full of tragedy and trauma. They don't celebrate it. I wanted to do a book that celebrates it. Like, I want to do a book that celebrates queer love. It's about time. Why not?
Which, like you said, the last book that you wrote, like largely there are only two gay rom coms. And I will agree somewhere because I really enjoyed your last book. And, it's very rarely you see a nice LGBTQ novel, which is fun because romance is romance. Then now,
Yeah.
if it is between two men, two women, elderly woman and a younger man, whatever, romance is romance and it is the most beautiful thing. And I, after your novel, wanted to read, but there aren't any. At least they haven't been promoted enough that it reaches to a layman. Or, when you go to a bookstore and you're like, would you recommend? And they look at you like, so
Exactly.
I'm very glad that you've decided to go all out, and we want a lot more books with this humor for all the people in the closets who are ready to accept it with this much warmth.
Yeah, because honestly, I think it's so important to have novels that are inspiring as for queer people. A lot of girls have actually loved the story in their 20s because I think it involves a wedding, and it's also the first time they're reading queer romances. As a romance, also that genre has not really come here, queer romance. we still, like I said, we have serious novels, we have tragic novels, somebody's always dying, something or the others, all miserable is always happening. They don't celebrate queer lives. I don't get it. I just don't get that whole train of thought. As an author, I understand why those authors must be doing it, is because it's much easier to manipulate a reader when you have situations like that. You know what I mean? It's much easier to manipulate somebody by saying, okay, now they've got a fatal disease. Okay, now let's get one leg cut of theirs. Okay, now let's get them dumped by the boyfriend. Okay, now let them commit suicide. So by the end of it, the reader's completely in tears, weeping and saying, oh, what a beautiful book. But actually, they've been completely manipulated. And I see that it's much harder to use humor and be inspiring and still tell a story. And that's really what I see myself doing. I mean, those novels are great and I think they deserve their space for sure. I mean, they're important novels, but they don't celebrate queer lives. They don't celebrate queer love. So then what's really the point of it?
So, like you said right now, that authors manipulate the readers. As a kid, I was manipulated so much that I wanted to pick every book where somebody died. I was like, no, this has to be a good one. Because if the couple has not met in the end, there's been tragic, I am going to enjoy it. So I become a sadist at one point.
Exactly. And I'm telling you, that's what even Indian readers have gotten used to. They've gotten used to the fact that queer novels will be sad. Because we've not had these rom-coms, because we've not had these romances coming in, they've gotten used to the fact that, okay, it's going to be miserable. They expect that. In fact, they're a little surprised that there's a happy rom-com. And I'm so glad seeing like a lot of girls, even a lot of guys enjoying this book, like in their 20s and their 30s, who are being exposed for the first time to queer literature. I'm happy they're being exposed with something like this and not something miserable.
I agree because you want something light, fun, and at the same time something that you're like, oh, this is so different and so nice. Though I had a very funny incident too. I was roaming with a tote bag that came along with the book. And obviously, I really love Firstly, I love the cover. People said you don't judge the book by the cover, but the colors and everything, it automatically sets the
You
tone
totally
for
do. Yeah.
like fun stuff. And wedding and all is always chaotic but fun. There's so much to do. I carry the bag, and suddenly I had looks coming, and then I was like, oh, I just realized the book did not realize that it's a novel tote.
Exactly. I mean, this whole tote thing was a great idea. And in fact, we were thinking of what are the taglines, what is it that will really work? Because I wanted the tote to also make an impact. You know what I mean? Just not a tote for itself, but to have something that actually says something to the book, but also says something more meaningful. And that whole thing of, usually say happily ever after. I said, okay, queerly ever after is even better. You know what I mean? Because that's what it's about.
You
So
have questions, like you have questions, and you're like, oh, no, 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 yeah, this is the book and whatever. So I think I should get a little extra points for promoting the book while roaming along with the tour.
you get 10 brownie points extra for it, for sure. Definitely.
Okay, back to Ved. Ved is a very interesting character, successful, confident, yet emotionally pulled into so many directions. So when you were writing Ved, how much of him came from observation of real people around you?
Definitely a lot. Some even from myself, honestly. Because, as a writer, I never believe writers who say that, oh, this book had nothing to do with me. All their books, every book, especially the first book, but all your books have some little aspect about the author in that book for sure. So but it's done subconsciously. It's not something that you say, okay, I'll pull this quality from me and I'll pull. There were some aspects that I saw in other people that I pulled in. But also, Shweta, another strange thing with queer literature, if you see a lot of the other books that are there, which are serious, which are full of tragedy, which are full of trauma, all of them also have characters who are from say, a low income background. They're not famous, they're not successful, they're not good looking. And I'm wondering why, because we have so many gay men who are famous, successful, good looking, talented, but why aren't they being reflected in literature? Like, are we saying that only like hideous, you know what I mean? Like, it's so odd. So I was like, let this guy have everything, you know what I mean? He looks good, but he's also emotionally complex. He's got his own issues like everybody else, right? He's got his own sort of like he's worried, like, will things work out? He has a mother who's sort of the center of his life, which for a lot of gay men, their mothers are actually very important. Their mothers are their best friends. So that's another aspect that's there. So yeah, I pulled in a little bits of myself. I pulled in a little bits from people I know, some fictional. But like I told you, Wade was both these characters are pretty much constructed with the last book. So I knew them really well. You know what I mean? I knew them inside out already. So it was quite a smooth ride that way.
Wade's life is almost like juggling multiple emotional worlds: family, expectations, his past, his present, relationship, and the social gaze. Because social gaze comes as an icing on the cake no matter what you're doing. So,
Yeah.
was it challenging to balance these layers while still keeping the story light and entertaining?
No, not really. I mean, it's so difficult to look back on a book in hindsight and say where did it come from. You honestly can't tell sometimes where it came from. You can realize where the idea to start it came from, but you can't, because for me, I give myself a very strict deadline of 1 year to 14 months max to write a book because I have a full time job. So I'm like, this is what it works. It's exactly in journalism. You have tight deadlines. I give myself a very tight deadline that whatever happens, the book has to be finished by 14 months max. No going beyond that. So in those 14 months, it's quite a crazy time for me because, it's very creative. That's a very creative space. You're writing the book, but it's also full of anxiety. You know what I mean? Every day, if whether I'm watching Netflix, whether I'm talking to somebody, whether I'm doing my work, at the back of my mind, the book is revolving. What's happening next? What's going to happen with this one? What issues are going to come in? It's all happening subconsciously. And sometimes I can't even sleep unless I've sat down and written out what's in my head. It might need to be corrected, it might need to be workshopped again, but I need to sort of, vomit that out from my head, what's been going on. So it's a lot of anxiety also in those. Honestly, like, all my friends will tell you that I become like a hermit. I don't meet anybody. I just totally get wrapped up into my book because those four, it's a very creative space, but it's also for me a lot of anxiety. Because I'm constantly like my focus, even if I'm reading another book, actually in my head, I'm thinking about my own book you know I'm thinking, oh my god, okay, maybe this is an interesting part to also add in. Or if I'm seeing something on Netflix and something clicks, about the character, I'll say, okay, maybe this is an interesting shade, and then trying to see how those things work. So it all flows very naturally together. There's no really sitting down and saying that, like, you can't do a spreadsheet and say, listen, this is what I'm going to do with. At least I don't do it. Some authors might. What I do is I do a 500-word outline of the book before I start, and then I just put in the spaces as I go along. I have the main story together. I don't have the end in my head at all, which naturally comes. But all of it, honestly, Shweta, I think the anxiety makes it flow. It's like I don't have that thing about writer's block. Being a journalist, and especially working in a newspaper, you can't afford the luxury of a writer's block. You have to put your story out that morning, come what may, or you lose your job, basically. So I'm trained to sort of just push myself irrespective to write. I can't have that luxury that's saying, okay, I'll take 4 days off and think over it. No, it has to be done. I don't sleep otherwise. And I just get going. So honestly, it's a very unconscious process. It all just flows. So let me give you an example. I didn't know about the surrogacy thing being banned for actually queer couples. That
Okay.
actually came in when I was writing the book and I did a Google search. I just did a Google search to find out a little bit more about surrogacy. And then I was like, oh my God, it's not allowed. I thought it was allowed. So that changed the
I
whole
thought
story
that
for.
for the longest time
Exactly,
because of
because we
the
see so
past
many
years.
people in the
Yeah.
papers, right, with their surrogate kids. So I thought the same. So I had no clue that this law had come in 2021, saying that you can't do it. And then when I saw that, I said, "Oh my God, that changes the whole story for me now." At least that angle changes. So things like this happen. I mean, you have to just sort of work with the flow. Things will come up. You have to mold and move around, but it's all pretty subconscious for me. It's not a Excel sheet that I say, okay, A to B, B to C, sort of this thing. No, it's pretty just as we go along.
If Ved was sitting with us today over here during our chitter chatter, what do you think he would say about the chaos of his own wedding?
I don't know what he'd say. I mean, here's a guy who sort of looked like George Clooney. I think he would just really be happy that they choose to do it, because he was really sort of full of trepidation of whether he should even propose to Carlos. It took a lot from him to do that. It is a big step, right? I mean, living together is one thing. Getting married to somebody is something totally different, especially when it's not even legal in your country, right? So I think he'd just be proud of himself that he took that step, and sort of things are working out for him. So I think he'd be very happy if you ask me.
One of the most beautiful things about this story is that it has its core. It's really about love in all its complicated forms. So, what did you want the readers to feel or understand about relationships through this story?
So my thing is really as a very, very basic thing, love is love. Between two people, love is love. The state does not need to give you permission to love somebody. Your parents don't need to give you permission to love somebody. Nobody needs to give you permission. Love is love, whether it's between two individuals, whether it's between two animals, whether it's between, two parents, whatever, parent and son, whatever. At the end of the day, it's between those two people. And for me, the main thing is really for the reader, I wanted them to feel that love between Wade and Carlos. Like, I really feel that truly, like, it's a truly romantic book for me. You know what I mean? A lot, especially towards the end, that aspect, and the dates that they go on, certain aspects. Also, just sort of like dealing with hurdles, right? Even when you're dealing with issues with somebody, that in itself is a form of love, right? When you support the other person, you help them out. How Carlos supports him through various things. I mean, Wade makes a lot of blunders. He makes a lot of silly mistakes with the ex-boyfriend and all of that stuff. But Carlos is such a rock. Like, he's so sensible, honestly. Like, I wish I was Carlos, but I'm not. You know, I mean, he's really the ideal guy to have in a certain sense. You know what I mean? So, if there's one thing I want the reader to take away, it's the love in the novel. Like, to me, that romantic aspect that is between two men, because a lot of people, especially older people, don't understand this thing that two men can be in love. They understand the fact that two men can have sex. They get that. You know what I mean? But they don't get the fact that they could actually be in love, that they actually want to live a life together, that they actually want to get married. Like, that hasn't sunk in for a lot of people. They just feel it surface level, oh, he's going through a phase of being gay, that sort of this thing. He'll change if he gets married to a woman. That's so common. We hear that so often, right? That all comes from that, right? Because they don't take it seriously. They just don't feel that you can actually be madly in love with another guy and want to take that to happily ever after, you know?
So there's this idea in the book that love doesn't exist in isolation. It's always entangled with family, history, expectations, and sometimes even secrets. What was it something you consciously wanted to explore?
You know, this again, like I told you, the strange thing is when I look back on this book, it hit me from one angle. It's what I've told you, right? It's a rom-com or rom-com. It's also, if you look at it, it's also a book about the gay male gaze from three different generations. There's Wade, who's of a certain generation, who wants to go ahead with his marriage but faces all these hurdles. There's Akshay, who was married, right? Who's a little older. He was married. He faced that whole problem. And now he's, hopefully finding somebody, that he truly loves, another guy. And then there is Kapil Uncle, right? Who I thought is a very interesting character because a lot of older gay men led very unhappy lives. Even if you meet Indian gay men in their 60s or more, they're somewhere a little bitter because they haven't had their shot at true love sometimes. They had to settle for whoever they met. There weren't apps in their generation. It wasn't easy to meet other men. They had to meet men at seedy places, sort of just settle for whoever they got, which some very often didn't work out you know and I think that's what happened to him, right? He also got married. He was in Oxford. He got married, but he knew he was gay. He knew what he was going through, and he led a pretty miserable life, frankly, because I mean, he was closeted his whole life, and even his wife possibly knew, but still sort of. So to me, it's also a book that looks at three different generations of gay men, the gaze, the male gay gaze, which comes through from that. But again, it's something that I realized only in hindsight. It's not something that I sat down and said, I'm going to do this consciously. It's something when I look back on the book, I'm like, yeah, it's giving you three different perspectives. Especially with the older guy, couple uncle. Like it's a very sad existence actually, and that's why he's so happy for Wade when he gets the wedding invitation. He's so happy to see his friend's son actually making that step and getting married, because he missed out on that. He missed out on that chance of love, which is really sad. I mean, I think it's so sad when you hear of people who didn't get their chance, they didn't get their shot. You know what I mean? Everyone deserves a shot at love,
True.
once, twice, 10 times also. Okay. But at least once, you know what I mean? And honestly, for a lot of the generation, even in India, it wasn't possible, because you couldn't 30, 40 years ago, how do you meet somebody else? It's so difficult. So many people left to go abroad because of that, because they felt their lives would be easier as gay men internationally. You know,
Correct.
living in India, it was so, how could you meet? And if you met also, it's not necessarily the person for you. It was just a furtive encounter that didn't go anywhere. So that's quite sad. So yeah, I think these three gazes are interesting.
Carlos, Wed's partner, brings a very cross cultural dynamic into the story, as well as how important was this dimension for you?
Yeah, so this was really important because I feel it's almost like, um, in some sense, it's a mirror to Wade. He's Carlos is so comfortable with who he is. He's so comfortable growing up with without all the trappings that I think Wade sometimes has.
Absolutely.
You know, and I thought it's interesting to have that thing where one opens the other's mind. One sort of makes the other one feel more secure. Which is what happens in relationships, right? Usually, like they say, opposites attract in some sense, right? You need somebody who has something that you don't have that they give you. And that's, I think, what works in dynamics between Carlos and Wade, because Carlos is so sort of grounded. He's so sensible. He knows exactly what he wants, and how to go about it. And I think that really grounds Wade, because Wade can be a little flighty and sort of all over the place and stuff like that. But I think Carlos is really like the grounding factor. And also just, this bundle of love. I mean, a lot of people have actually loved Carlos a lot in the book, because he really is just this gooey bundle of love in the book. So, yeah.
There's also this fascinating subplot that we spoke in the beginning about Wade's mother being blissfully in love with a younger man. And there's something we don't often see. I mean, we see, but we don't portray it with humor and warmth. What inspired that track?
So that was really because you know, I felt she deserved her chance at love. She was in love with the father, but the father was too busy with business, which is so typical of a lot of Indian businessmen, right? They're so busy with their lives. They don't really have time for their family. Even Wade missed out so much from his father, right? It was the mother or the servant who took care of him. The father was always busy building the business, which is a very realistic portrayal. That's how it really is with a lot of business families. The father's away and it's the mother who takes over. So I felt that after her divorce, I just felt she deserved a second shot at love. you know and also because she is sort of like such a fun character. She's such a fun person. She's so full of life. And I just felt like I really wanted her to also have somebody to support her. I did not want her to be on her own. I wanted her to have that second shot at love. You know, Again, like I'm telling you, not planned, something that just happened while I was writing it. When it came up to the mother, it just naturally happened that, okay, this might be an interesting angle to explore. But I'm so glad I did, because I really feel that whole thing about an older woman finding somebody to love. I mean, that taboo needs to be busted, that it's perfectly fine. Whether you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, age does not matter. When it comes to love, age does not matter. Gender does not matter, you know. So I'm glad I busted that aspect at least.
In your opinion, why do family secrets always seem to surface exactly when life events are happening, like a wedding is happening?
Because they always do, don't they? I mean, secrets come at the most unopportune times. They always come to sort of like knock you off your balance at some point or the other. Um, again, strangely, not something that was planned. It was just something when it came to the father's aspect. I just thought, okay, what is it that is going on in his life? I was just trying to figure out, okay, I've got the mother's aspect correct, I've got Wade's aspect correct, but what about the dad? Right? He's so busy with work. He can't just be busy with work. What's his backstory? Like what really happened with him earlier? We don't really know that. And that was the idea of bringing up that whole thing of the secret of his days in Oxford. The idea was to give the father a backstory also. I didn't want him to just be a side character that he's just there working and supporting. He needed his own story too. You know, so yeah, I mean, secrets always crop up at the strangest of timings. I mean, what do you say?
Let's talk about the X factor, which always adds the spice. So, Ved's ex boyfriend Akshay returns to this picture and adds a very interesting emotional tension. Do you believe past relationships always leave something behind in us, even when we think we've moved on?
You know, I'm one of those people who never looks at the past, personally. I All my exes are actually on my social media. Okay, they're all there. I'm in touch with all of them, but just on social media. I never look back. I never ever go back to anything. Uh, it just doesn't work for me. I feel people come into your lives for a season, for a reason, or to teach you something. And once that's over, it's time to move on. That's how I see it. That's not necessarily Wade's thinking, right? I mean, he was still feeling like, oh my God, okay, I should still like sort of, be friends with him and be in touch with him because that's the sort of guy he is. I'm different. That's the other thing, Shweta. People think very often that, the character is exactly like the author. It's not that at all. We're two separate people. I mean, what we write and what we read are two separate things also often. Somebody can read a lot of literary fiction, but can be writing children's books. You know what I
Right.
mean? They're two separate things when it comes to an author. So similarly, Wade is a different person. I think for him it was important to still have this. He was curious because Akshay at the end of the day was his first big love. And for all of us, our first big love means that little bit more than everybody else. We have that little soft spot that still sort of sucks us in and says, okay, maybe we can still. And when you meet, it's always a big mistake, but you still feel that this thing. So that's why he meets him. He wants to know what's happening in his life, but he's very clear from the beginning that nothing is going to happen between them. Like he's very secure with Carlos. He's not. It's actually Akshay who now feels that he made a mistake. It's the regret that he feels that he should not have listened to his parents and gotten married to a woman. He should have stuck to his guns and stayed with when they had it going. They had a good relationship going. Everything was great, but he gave in to the pressure of his parents, right? Which so many Indian gay men do and similarly he just regrets it. Like he realizes that that was truly the person he loved, not unfortunately the woman he married. you know so I mean, that's where the regret comes in. But for me, as a person, I don't look back. What's over, it's over. I just look forward.
That's the best thing to do. Move forward and look forward, irrespective of what happens.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I, and I'm sure the other readers immediately must have noticed about your storytelling is the humor part. Even when situations have got messy, the narrative feels heavy, there is warmth and wittiness. So, is humor a natural part of your writing voice, or do you consciously add it while editing?
No, I mean it is. I've always, even if you ask my friends, they'll all if you ask them describe Farhad, one thing they will always say is witty. I don't realize I'm witty, but my friends always realize. You know what I mean? It's a very strange thing. You don't. It's not something you can. You don't plan wittiness. It's just either happens naturally or it doesn't happen. But that's something all my friends will always tell you if you ask them. Like that's one thing they will always say, and I think that's also been part of my writing, even in journalism. I used to write a lot of articles which were a lot of fun, which were witty, taking whatever subject. Because I like wit. I think there's something fun about it. I'm not a person who likes puns. I find puns are the lowest form of wit, but I think being witty is great. If you can take something and toss it on its head and make the person laugh about something that's quite serious still, I think you won somewhere. you know so it was again very natural, but I will say that in writing a rom-com there is a particular style, because at the end of the day it is a romantic comedy. So unless you're putting that comedy aspect in it, you can't call it a rom-com.
Correct.
So you do have to definitely see to it that there is humor in it. Writing a rom-com needs a particular style that's different from just writing a romance or writing any other book. There is a particular style involved that's needed, with seeing that there's enough humor, there's enough romance in it. Otherwise it's not a rom-com. So yeah, but I didn't plan it. I mean, I just let it go with the flow. There were jokes that they didn't work later when I saw them. I said scratch them out. I was like, no, it's too trivial or silly. The ones that I left them because obviously even my editor thought and copy editor thought they were good. And they were fine. There was one reference to the other man also in the book, which came up, and they were like, "Are you sure you want to put that reference in?" I was just like, "Yeah," because to me, I was like, "That's like a side wink from the author." That's the author putting his own little persona into the book. So sometimes you do these things. They're all in good nature and fun. Honestly.
A big Indian wedding is almost like a social spectacle. Relatives, emotions, drama, tradition, gossip, everything. And in Queerly Beloved, the wedding almost feels symbolic. So, did you see the wedding as a metaphor for something larger, acceptance, identity, or belonging, or something?
I mean, it is such a big deal, right? I mean, the whole thing of two men getting married, sealing their union. Um, I mean, you're basically starting another chapter in your life. It's like I said, it's one thing to live together, but it's a totally different thing to actually be like, even though it's not by law, you don't have that legal piece of paper saying it, it's still a big deal to exchange rings, to say the vows, which I feel I was just like, I was melting when I was writing all of that stuff. You know what I mean? Because I was like, I've never read this myself in a book. I've never read a book which has this. And I was like, at that point, so happy to put it in, because I was like, I'm sure there's so many people who will feel the same way, that we've been denied of this for so long.
Hmm.
So why not have that? So I mean, of course, it's a big symbolism. It's also about families coming together, right? I mean, like Wade's mom tells Carlos very clearly, like, don't call me auntie, I'm your mom now, which is so special, right? I mean, he gets into tears over it. So there are lots of things that do come about with a marriage, which are a big deal.
The book also contributes to the growing space of diverse love stories in Indian fiction. Like, did you feel any responsibility while writing a story that represents queer relationships within an Indian cultural context?
Yeah, so my responsibility was really to see that it's inspiring, to see that it's positive, to see that issues that realistically queer couples deal with are represented, but also with a large dose of humor and romance. But sure, I mean, definitely at the back of my mind, I'm very conscious that, there will be LGBT young minds reading this. There'll be young readers. And I want it to have a positive impact on them. I want them to believe that yes, it will all work out. Yes, so what? Whatever, the state is against your marriage. You can't, surrogacy is again, but still things will work out for you. You will find love. I mean, that's my main thing. My main message is that irrespective of everything, you will find love. You will get your shot at love. You know what I mean? So definitely, I mean, it's definitely at the back of my mind, that it needs to be positive. It needs to be inspiring. I think inspiring is a big thing for me, because I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have these sort of books growing up, and I wish I did. I read a lot of books which were
Wow.
very unhappy. They're very well written books, even internationally. They're very well written books, but they were all full of tragedy, full of trauma, making you feel like, oh my God, if you're a gay man, you're going to lead a pretty miserable life. You're never going to find the love of your life. I mean, either he's going to break up with you and get married, or he's going to break your heart, or he's going to have a fatal disease and die. I mean, that sort of stuff. And I was just like, I wish I had books that I read when I was growing up. So it's in some sense my child, like young wish to give that to younger queer people. That here's something that will inspire you.
And how far have readers responded to the book so far? Have there been reactions or messages that have really stayed with you?
So a lot of young girls have loved it. I mean, in their 20s, a lot of them have said, we've never read a queer book before. We loved it. And I think that's what it is. I got a lot, been getting a lot of messages also. We loved the book. We really liked it. A lot of positive, output to it. Even guys have really liked it. But girls, I feel, have really, really gone for this one, especially who are in their 20s and early 30s. I think one, they've never been exposed to something like this. So, that in itself is something plus it's got a lot of masala, it's pretty Bollywoodish. So all of that works, in India for sure. So that helps. But also, I think for them, again, it's that whole thing of never having read something like this before. We don't see this, I mean, even in our movies, right? I mean, we've had very, very few, gay rom-coms or gay romances. I think Badai Do was the last one, which was very nice, but that was so long ago. Because unfortunately here the system is different in terms of what movies work and stuff like that. So I think it was a book waiting to happen. I think they were waiting for something like this, and now, I mean, I'm telling you, I've got messages where girls have been like, I've been waiting to read this since I saw the cover has been a huge success. So I think the
It
cover really,
definitely is.
yeah. And I think the whole thing of a big fat wedding, right? I mean, I think that really interests a lot of people. It's not just a story about two guys meeting or whatever. I mean, they're preparing this big, massive wedding with all its drama. So, yeah, I mean, there have been lovely, lovely messages.
So, before we wrap up, one last question. If readers had to take away just one feeling or thought after finishing Quirly Beloved, what would you hope it is?
My hope is that they truly believe that love exists for them. My hope is that they truly believe that irrespective of whatever heartbreak they've gone through, whatever it is, that they will get their true shot at love again. That to me is that's why it's queerly beloved. I mean, that's the idea even of the title, that you will get your shot at love if you truly believe it. You have to believe it. You can't be the cynic and be like, no, no, no. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, especially in the gay world, have gone through a lot of heartbreaks. I did a talk some time ago, and there were some guys out there saying that, we've just been through a really bad relationship, and this book helped me, like another book helped them, or stuff like that. And I think they're looking for things to make them feel more positive, to make them feel that, yes, it will look up. So that's really what I want to give them, that yes, you'll get your shot at love, it will happen, and you will get your queerly ever after, you know.
I hope all the people out there get their love and they live a happily ever after, a queerly happily ever after. And Farhad, thank you so much. This has been a lovely conversation. Your book reminds me that love in all its forms can be messy, surprising, and sometimes hilariously complicated, but it's what makes life meaningful. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us on Chitter Chatter.
Thank you, Shweta. Thanks. So happy to be here again.